Okay. Alrighty, Chevra. So thank you so much for joining as we continue our journey through Sichos HaRan, B'siyata D'Shmaya. I'm going to share my screen so we can all see the sources together. We have two very beautiful, very fundamental, wonderful teachings to learn together with Hashem's help. So I'm going to share my screen now. And Baruch Hashem, we were able to make a very exciting announcement for those that are connected to Eilecha on WhatsApp, which I think is most of you. Starting on Sunday, we're going to be releasing two recordings, audio recordings, a week that are based on or presenting beautiful, beautiful short stories. Some are just a few lines, some are even just a line, some are a little bit longer. Beautiful stories written by a Yid, Rebbe Nachman, who was a close Talmud of Rebbe Usher Freund, who's a big tzaddik. Be'ezer Hashem, in the first recording, I'll give a little bit of biographical information about this Rebbe Usher. Very, very special tzaddik, very connected to Breslov, and very unique in many ways. Gigantic mekubal, gigantic bal chesed. And he just had the most beautiful, healthy teachings. And this Talmud of his, Rebbe Nachman, took these teachings and developed glorious, unique tales. Really, there's nothing like them that I've seen outside of Rabbi Nachman's famous Sipur Maisius. But just the most gorgeous expressions of neshama. So Be'ezer Hashem, we're going to be starting a series going through those stories one by one story each recording. And we're going to be reading the story, translating the story, and then exploring the theme. And they're so deep, they're so full of mystery and secret and poetry. They're really, it's a masterpiece, this little book that we're going to be learning out of, called Shmona Va'arba Sipurim, just 84 stories. So what a privilege. Be'ezer Hashem, very excited about that. So that's starting on Sunday. Look out for it. If you're not subscribed already, Be'ezer Hashem, you'll find a link somewhere, and you'll be able to subscribe to it. Okay, so let's jump into our shiur B'siyata D'Shmaya. We are up to Sichos HaRan Samach 65. Sichos HaRan Samach is very short, as you can see. It's just two lines in the way that we've set it up, or one line if you had them both together. And Rabbi Nachman says the following, a very almost shocking statement just comes out of the gate with this. Al yidei simcha, through joy, which of course Rabbi Nachman spoke a great deal about, nitzolim mimisas banim. A person is spared the horrible, unimaginably tragic experience of losing a child, losing a son. Now, this experience of people Nebuch losing children was far more prevalent, of course, in the times of Rabbi Nachman, where medicine wasn't developed to the point that, like we've learned in our series, Rabbi Nachman advised people that it would be healthier to abstain from going to doctors and from holding back from taking medicines, because the medicine was so underdeveloped that it was more dangerous than not going to a doctor at all. So medicine really wasn't developed in any real way. And there weren't such things as vaccines, vaccinations against polio, for example, tuberculosis, basic things that humanity hadn't yet figured out a way, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu hadn't yet put it in the minds of those Chachmei Refuah to come up with ways of surviving terrible illnesses that would spread also because of the lack of cleanliness in their living conditions, also made the situation and the way that they lived ripe for epidemics that were constantly ripping through those regions in Ukraine and really the world over. Rabbi Nachman himself can't possibly speak callously or without great reverence for this particular topic, because Rabbi Nachman, as many of us know, Rabbi Nachman himself lost 4 children. His daughters who survived were 4 out of 8. Rabbi Nachman lost 4 children. I believe 2 of them were boys. Rabbi Nachman lost. I think one of them was actually named Yaakov, and one of them was famously named Shlomo Ephraim. Rabbi Nachman understood what the pain was. Rabbi Nachman didn't chas v'shalom in any way mean to suggest that the reason why a person chas v'shalom would have to go through this, like we said, this unfathomably tragic experience of losing a child, we can't even imagine. It's their fault because they weren't happy enough. That's not what Rabbi Nachman means to say. Chas v'shalom, chas v'shalom. Nistarim darkei Hashem, like we say, Hashem nasan, Hashem lakach. We can never give a definitive reason, really, for anything, unless it's coming from a navi, or a unanimous understanding of the tzadikei hadar or the gedolim. Even that, we don't really know anything definitive. Certainly, the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs His world, we have no way of understanding this. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to see Hashem's tefillin. HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him only the kesher shel tefillin in the back of his head. Why do good things happen to bad people? Why do bad things happen to good people? These are the saides, right? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't even offer any kind of explanation for one of the most emblematic experiences of Hashem's unfathomable way of running the world, which of course is the Misa, the death of Rabbi Akiva, who was murdered tragically in the most barbaric way. And when Moshe Rabbeinu and the Malachim come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and ask, Zutar v'Zuschair, HaKadosh Baruch Hu responds by saying, Shtoik, silence. Silence, be still, be silent, meaning to say, silence the mind. The human mind is not able, at this level of consciousness where we are right now, certainly in exile, at this moment in time, we're not able to grasp these things. Nistarim darkei Hashem. And any reason that we try to offer, it's always going to necessarily be conjecture. So Rabbi Nachman chas v'shalom doesn't mean over here to give a blanket rule and to say if you should happen to hear chas v'shalom, you should never even hear from such a thing. But if you should happen to hear of a person that's lost a child, it must be that it was their fault because they weren't besimcha enough. Chas v'shalom, we have to clear the air from the beginning. There's no way that Rebbe Nachman means to suggest that. Rather, that Tzaddik is encouraging us to be besimcha as much as we can. We're going to learn in the second teaching about how we can bring ourselves to a state of simcha. We're going to learn about what that means. Because if, as we're going to learn in the next line, there is some kind of kitrug, there is some kind of satanic and demonic energy that would otherwise have had some kind of effect, chas v'shalom, on a person's child. At least this we can avoid. We cover this base. But that doesn't mean that it's an ironclad rule. It doesn't mean that people who are happy will never lose children, and it doesn't mean that people, chas v'shalom, who have lost children are at fault because they weren't happy enough. That's not what Rabbi Nachman means over here. Rabbi Nachman is telling us and encouraging us to make sure to drill into our psyche and our heart and our consciousness how important simcha is. Because through simcha, it's possible that a person will spare his or her children, chas v'shalom, without even finishing the sentence. And Rabbi Nachman explains this, and he says, Ki aklipa ha'ishekes oisam, chas v'shalom, or isekes oisam, because the klipa, that impure energy that is able to have some kind of impact on the lives of children, that grabs them, chas v'shalom, nikra lamed yud taf. It's the name of a female demon who has this name. And the tzaddikim, as we're going to see in a minute from the Shla Kaddish, an amazing piece. But the Shla Kaddish teaches that the shirish, the root of this word, lilis, it's a word, we don't say it so much in the context of the demon for fear of awakening it, right? But it's still a word. It actually shows up in Tanakh, in Yeshayahu, where Yeshayahu is making reference to a kind of bird that flies at night. And the Mefarshim explained that the reason this bird is called lilis is because it's constantly groaning. It's constantly crying out, like the word yilala means to wail. It's constantly wailing and crying. And so Rabbi Nachman says, if this is what this demon's essence is, crying, sadness, and it is able, chas v'shalom, to go ahead and to have an impact, like we said, to cause the death of children, So the way to combat that, Rebbe Nachman says, is simcha. Simcha hua hepech mimena. Simcha, joy, is the opposite, is the contrast of this particular demon who has this name of this night bird, this night owl called Lilith. Joy is the hepech of this. And of course, we know that simcha is always related to kedusha. Like we say, that Pasuk in Tehillim says, Oiz v'chedva b'mekaymai. In Hashem's place, there's oiz, there's confidence, and there's simcha, and there's joy. And we know that all the Nevi'im needed first to awaken upon themselves a great spirit of joy, sometimes using musical instruments, like we know, Vatihi, Kimnagin, Hamanagin, Vatihi alav Yad Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's spirit rests upon a person when they're in a state of great joy. Ein hashchina shoyra ela mitoch simcha shel mitzvah. And the reason is because joy is the natural state. Joy is the natural state. Joy is the essential state. It's in a state of joy that a person, like we say, Ya'er Hashem panav elecha v'chuneka. When does a person want to go out and create and produce and get together with other people and manifest their own energy that they have inside of themselves in a way that's going to benefit the world? Only when they're in a state of simcha. Simcha is contagious. Simcha is contagious, right? It's constantly wanting to move. It's constantly wanting to spread itself like a flame from wick to wick, from wick to wick. Simcha is his spashtus. It's connected to ar. La Yehuda Maisa Oira the simcha. What's light? You light a little bit of a light in the room, the whole room lights up, right? That's what simcha is. Simcha wants to spread. So the essence of our neshama is in a state of simcha all the time, because the essence of our neshama is a portion of the divine. And like we said about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, oiz v'chedva b'mekaymai. By Hashem, there's always rejoicing, always rejoicing. What gets in the way of that is this experience of yilala, of wailing, of losing confidence, of feeling misaligned with our essence. So depression is not something that we need to deal with or engage with in such a way of saying we need to find some way of being besimcha. We need to bring ourselves to a state of simcha and find some strategy to enable ourselves to get there. The truth is, we are already besimcha. There's a place of us inside that's always already besimcha. And what's covering it is this klipa, which means a shell. It's covering it over. It's getting in the way. It's blocking up the channels. But simcha is what naturally flows. And our job is just to remove the yilala, is to remove the lilith, is to remove this kind of klipa, this negative spirit. And when we do that, then we're able to reveal the Shekhinah that we contain within ourselves that can only rest in a place of simcha, because that's the place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light is shining into the world. Like we say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the Torah ba'ar panecha, with the light of his face. And of course, the Torah is itself full of rejoicing all the time. The chedvasa dili, the Zohar Kadosh says. What it means that Am Yisrael are learning Torah, they're engaged, va'askin bechedvasa dili. They're rejoicing. They're engaged in my rejoicing. Hashem calls the Torah, and the Torah is given ba'ar panecha, la Yehuda Maisa Oira v'simcha. That's the natural state of the Jew. That's the natural state of the neshama. Our task is to make sure that we're stripping away the external layers as much as we can of the guf, which gets in the way and hides the neshama, physically oriented kinds of behavior that we know are not enabling ourselves to tap into the essence of who we are. All of these things are going to cause sadness, lack of emunah, trying to feel that we control things and then getting upset when things don't work out and getting down on ourselves because we feel that it's something we did or didn't do. All of this is going to get in the way of simcha. Simcha is emunah. Simcha is neshama. It's our natural state. We're far closer to living in a state of simcha than we ordinarily think. It's just a matter of getting everything out of the way. Instead of needing to find some way of acquiring simcha, we have to reveal the simcha that we already have. And so Rebbe Nachman says, if we're able to get rid of this shell called Lilith, which comes from the word Yilala, in that way, we're able to guard against misas banim. We're able to guard against the death of children, chas v'shalom. At least, again, to the extent that we're able to. Hashem has his plans. And there's no way, again, just to review, there's no way of definitively explaining why these things happen, and nebuch they do. And we should never hear of such things. There's no way of putting a reason. Shtoik. Kach ala b'machshava. We have to respond with silence. Vayidaim Aaron, right? Aaron reacted to the death of his own children, Nadav and Avihu, Vayidaim, with total silence. Total silence. Rebbe Nachman says, to the extent that we can do everything to protect against this, I want to take a look at the Shlar Kaddish, and then we'll go back to the teaching. And I want to share two alternative ways of reading this that are less literal, but I think are also very true. And before going into the Shlar, I just like to express my appreciation to you, because it's not a given that we should be able to take time out of our busy day and share it together. And I know that there's so much else to listen to and so much else to connect with. And it really makes a very, very big difference to all of us that all of you are here and are contributing your ratzon to grow with us together. It's a very special thing. So I'm very grateful for it. Thank you very much. Let's take a look at the Shlar. The Shlar Kaddish says over here in Parshas Kiseitze, very amazing Shlar Kaddish, very interesting, enigmatic. He says, Gama tefillah hi kaveshas melchames rabbos. He says, when a person davens, it becomes conquered in melchames rabbos and many different kinds of wars that are being waged against our tefillahs. The tefillah leaves our mouth, it starts to go up, not physically, but it starts to be bokeah, like the Zohar Kaddish describes. It starts to burst through different spiritual barriers to be able to get to Hashem, whatever that means, right? Our tefillah works, the whole sugya in and of itself. There are wars that are waged against our tefillahs. Then our klipas satanim, all the different kinds of satanic personalities and energies in the spiritual realm, and the shells try to enclose the tefillah and bind it to prevent it from rising. Asher himaleim b'chol avira olam, which in a certain sense are filling all the atmosphere of the world, is filled, like the Gemara Brachas tells us. We're not able to see it. If we could see it, we wouldn't be able to live. We wouldn't be able to be miskayim even for a second. And there's stories in the Gemara about those that went through certain processes to enable themselves to see it, and they couldn't handle it. The whole world is filled with these energies, which means that it's a very spiritually precarious place to be. Ragleha yardos maves, like the pasuk says, and the tzaddikim explain this world, and the Ari HaKadosh says is roiv klipa. It's really, and we know that because we don't have to believe it on some spiritual plane. It's just a fact. This world is a very spiritually challenging place. It's very hard to remain conscious of Hashem. And what is that? That's klipa and satanim. That's external shells and different satanic forces that seek to prevent us from properly connecting to Hashem, and seek to prevent us from using our bechira to be able to peek into a realm where we no longer have bechira, because it's so clear to us that Hashem is real, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is constantly holding us and communicating with us and encouraging us and walking with us. But the whole world is filled with satanim. It's filled with klipa. And the Shlah says that our tefillah is not able to go up. The first thing that we need to do when we daven, what do we say in the beginning? Psuke de Zimra. After Birchas HaShachar, we say Psuke de Zimra. What does it mean on a simple level? Psuke de Zimra means these are verses of song, all derived from Tehillim, and we say these psukim to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then we move into Birchas Kriyashma, the brachas afterwards, Shemana Esrei, Yeridas HaShefa afterwards, Ashrei V'Letzion. But we begin davening, the bulk of our davening in the beginning is Psuke de Zimra. But the Ari HaKadosh says that Zimra doesn't just mean Miloshin Zemer, like a song, but it can actually mean Lizmor. Lizmor Karmecha means to cut down. To reap a harvest is Lizmor. That word can mean to sing, it could also mean to cut. Says the Shlar Kaddish, you know what we're doing in Psuke de Zimra? It's like we have a hatchet, and we're hatcheting our way through the thick forest of all these negative forces that seek to prevent us from davening and seek to prevent our tefillah from being ola lamala, from rising above. Psuke de Zimra. The first thing we need to do, we need to hatchet our way through this thicket, through this thick forest of darkness, And that's why we begin our tefillah with Psukei de Zimra. That's what we're accomplishing. And as we make our way closer and closer and closer until in the Oimid Alatsur, like the Berditchever says, Shemana Esrei, you don't walk anymore, you just stand still because you're already there. And you don't need to say, you just need to whisper into Hashem's ear, because we've journeyed through the worlds of Asiya to Yitzira to Bria, and then finally Shemana Esrei is Atzilos, which comes from the word Etzlo. We are next to Hashem. We whisper our tefillah and it goes through. But the first thing we need to do is Psukei de Zimra. Now he says, Va'aktim l'cha mashikasa, a sefer called Boichim. He brings from the sefer, I don't know who the author is, I have to look into it, called Kol Boichim, which seems to be a Kabbalah sefer. And he says this amazing thing. The pasuk in Eicha says, Nashim b'tziyain inu, which on a simple level tragically means that there were women in Sion, in Yerushalayim, who were violated as part of this tragic siege and then ultimate destruction of Yerushalayim. This is what the pasuk means. These three words: Nashim, women, B'tzion, Yerushalayim, Inu, were violated. Isa b'Zayar Nazar Kadesh says, you know what it's referring to over here? Not even on a simple level, it's talking about the Nashim Tzidkaniyas of Am Yisrael. He says, no, it's talking about two very specific women who did the violating. Not Nashim B'tzion were themselves violated, but Nashim B'tzion Inu. At the time of the Churban, there were two women, so to speak, which means two female energies, which I can't get into now. It isn't anything that's specific to a female or a male, but all of us have these energies within ourselves, which relate to Malchus, which is a vessel, which is a kli, which on the one hand can be used to reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, but on the other hand, can conceal and can give the impression of this world being an empty vessel that's devoid of godliness. That's the energy of Malchus de Sitra Achra, which Rebbe Nachman talks about in Torah Aleph and Likutei Moharan, which we began teaching last night in Chaburas Habal Shem Tov. The recording is up on SoundCloud for anybody who's interested. We started a new series based on my Sefer Sunlight of Redemption, but we're going to go very deeply into it now for the next couple of weeks and months. Everybody's invited to join us. So he says that Inu, the ones who did the violating, were these Nashim. That's what the Zohar Kodesh says. Isa b'Zayar heim shtei ishos hazima. There are two wayward females, right? Again, but feminine spiritual energies. Halayhema, and they are Lilith, which is this mother of wailing that we've described and been discussing, Umachalas bas Yishmael, and one of the wives of Esav, who was Machalas, the daughter of Yishmael. These are the two women. Nashim is a reference to these two female, feminine, demonic energies. And it's brought from the Heilige Tzadikim, Shalilis Halchim Ita, that along with Lilith, if you could imagine such a thing, accompanying her entourage, as it were. Again, this is not physical in any way, right? On a spiritual level, whatever these things mean, I certainly don't know. We're just reading and translating the words. Her entourage is 480 kitais, 480 platoons, Shamalache Chavala, of destroying angels. Why 480? Because that's the gematria of this word Lilith, Kaminian Lilith. And they walk, and it's like a wild thing to imagine. They walk umiyaleles. She walks and she cries out in the most horrible wail, the kulam oines achareha, and all of them answer with this groan, with this wailing and moaning. And that's Lilith. V'chein machalas, but this other demon called machalas, halchim ima, along with her walk, taf ayin he, 475 kitos kaminin machalas, which is also the gematria of this word machalas. The numerical value of mem, ches, lamed, taf is 475. So with her walk 475 platoons of destroying angels. But by her, it's very different, a different energy of negativity. It's a different kind of klipa. It's a different kind of shell preventing us from connecting to Hashem. How so? Because like her name suggests, the kulam mechaylulos bechalilin. They are all mechaylulos, they're all playing these kinds of flutes, and they're all dancing around in circles. Elu miyalulim kishma lilis. The platoon of destroying angels that accompany Lilith are wailing, because that's what the name implies. Lamed Yud Taf is related, like we said, to the word Yilala, which means to wail. And the Elu, and the platoons of destroying angels that are accompanying Machlas, Bas Yishmal, the Elu Mechalalim b'Mecholos. And they're dancing around in circles with tremendous joy. Kishma Machalas, like her name implies. Now, of course, it's not the proper type of holy joy that we're speaking about, but it's the joy of, if you can even call it joy, it's what's called Hailulus. It's just a kind of celebration that brings a person further from Hashem, not closer to Hashem, not true simcha. The simcha of the guf, which we know is just short-lived and is not ultimate, is not real, is not essential, is not eternal. And it brings a person to become more focused on the ego and less focused on Hashem. That's the energy of machla. So we have two negative energies. Then the energy of Lilith, which is wailing, which is yilala, which is the lack of emunah, which is everything that we discussed about the way in which a person grows so forlorn and feels so rejected by Hashem and despairs. That's the energy of Lilith, Yilala. And then the flip of that, which is often goes hand in hand, because the more the person feels that way, they try to drown out their pain in all kinds of machalas, all kinds of mecholos, which don't come from a good place or a healthy place, and is a mirage, is a facade, isn't the truth. That's machalas. And here he says a very, very interesting thing. I haven't really to think a little bit more about this. But he says, V'hanashim halalu, these two women, einai poigos elu be'elu la'olam. They never ever meet. They never interact. These two energies are completely different. Hagam, he says, ki milchama atzuma beinehem. Because he says they're at war. These two energies are at war. Now, even though both of them contribute, chas v'shalom, like we said before, they go together in a certain sense, they contribute to a person who's in a downward spiral of depression, and then which is Lilith, and then trying as best as he or she can to numb the pain with machalas bas yishmal, which breeds, as we know the cycle does, more yilala, and then more the illusion that, okay, this time I can finally really be happy, finally, which constantly leads, and so on and so forth. So they both contribute, chas v'shalom, to Hashem becoming completely shut out and closed away from a person's life. But because they're rooted in Kedusha, like everything is, like Rebbe Nachman says in Torah, Kuf Yud Beis in Likutei Moharan, Rebbe Nachman over there says that all of the klipos are only able to exist because they draw their yonek, they draw their energy from holiness, from Kedusha. In Kedusha, these two things couldn't possibly be more distant. So again, it's an exact parallel, meaning in the way of Tumah, there are no greater friends than Machalas and Lilith. Because like we said before, they feed into each other. And it begins with a person giving up on himself, and a person feeling so down about himself, and a person sinking down into the level of ego, into the level of distance from Hashem, and then things don't work out. And then we let go of emunah, chas v'shalom, and then the person, like we said, seeks to numb that pain with artificial kinds of experiences of joy and of rejoicing, but it's not for real. So in the side of Tumah, they go together, but in the side of Kedusha, never the twain shall meet. There can't be anything more distant from each other than sadness and a tremendous amount of simcha. And over here, it's very important. He's not talking about sadness called shivron leiv, which we've learned about. That could be very holy. Rebbe Nachman says, achar shivron leiv bas simcha. We've learned that teaching in Sichos HaRan. That is okay. Those two things go together. Over here, we're talking about depression. We're talking about, and not clinical depression, a person needs medication. We're talking about yiush, a person giving up, about a person stopping to feel as if they're able to get up after a fall. stopping to feel as if there's purpose to their struggle, as if there's meaning to their pain, and as if all their failures is part and parcel of a process of growth. And as much as it humbles them and it enables them to further and further reach out to Hashem, like the Rebbe says, and we're going to learn this later in Sichos HaRan, that Rebbe Nachman called out and he said, "Va'klal," the main thing is ha'ikirhu. You know what the main thing is? Mi beten sha'ol shivati. This pasuk that is rooted in Yonah, who is in the belly of the whale. And Yonah says to Hashem, Mi beten sha'ol shivati. From the depth of Sha'ol, from the depth of hell, Shivati, I prayed to you, I called out to you, and there's nothing more positive, there's nothing more optimistic, there's nothing more hopeful than prayer. So that's what we're speaking about. Lilith is this experience of despair, of yush, giving up. And they never meet. And he says there's a tremendous war between them. Zulasi b'Yom Kippur. There's only one time that these two come together, and that's on Yom Kippur. Strange thing, he says. Never heard of this before I saw this. Elu ve'elu, where they meet each other, and there's a tremendous battle between them. Bindain l'dain, and while they're fighting it out on Yom Kippur, these two armies of the Satan are occupied with fighting one another, and meanwhile, all the prayers of Am Yisrael go up unaffected, unharmed. Amazing thing. On Yom Kippur, that's the great battle. That's the great battle between these forces. What that means, what the application is for us, I'll leave that to you and to me to think about on our own time. I think there's a great deal of depth there. And I think that gives us a great deal of insight into what Yom Kippur is, what's happening on Yom Kippur, both on the side of Tumah, but also on the side of Kedusha. How much on Yom Kippur, rejoicing of Kedusha comes together with brokenheartedness of Kedusha, right? Okay. He closes, when a person sins, it is told to these two energies, Nashim sha'ananais koimna, the pasuk in Yeshayahu, which means you calm woman, stand up, koimna, stand up. But he says again, it's referring to these two negative demonic energies. Kalaimar, etna nashim, lama tiyu shananais. Why should you be still? Kumu, stand up, v'chrivu ha'olam, and come and destroy the world. V'zeu v'nashim mashlubai. Right, and these are the women that, again, not the woman, but these are these two female energies that mashlu, that are able to go ahead and to attack the world. So this is just a little bit of a background as to what this demon Lilith is. Gematria Tuf Pei 480, who has this ability to bring about this thing called Misas Banim, which we were translating until now as the death of one's children on a literal level. Hashem Yishmar, Hashem Yirachim. And we learned that simcha can ward off that tragic eventuality if it were to happen in a person's life because a person is sad, which again, we will never know what the reason Hashem does things is or are. But Rebbe Nachman says that through simcha, it's true, a person can be spared from misas banim. But I want to suggest two other interpretations of this line. The first is that banim, of course, on a literal level means children. But Rashi, quoting from Chazal, in the beginning of Parshas Noach, tells us, Elu told us Noach is tzaddik, says Rashi, Iker b'neihem shel tzaddikim is maisim toivim, right? The primary offspring, the primary banim, the primary children of tzaddikim, of the righteous, which is all of us, va'amichulam tzaddikim, is our good deeds. That's the primary offspring that we produce. That's called banim. That's called our children. And Rebbe Nachman says Lilith, Yilala, wailing, giving up. That's the klipa. That's the negative force. That's osekes osam. That kills our good deeds. It's a sense of sadness The feeling that I'm not worth anything. My davening is not worth anything. I'm really not able to focus with kavana. I'm really not able to be authentic. I really don't mean this. That's called misas banim. And that's the domain of Lilith. And the Rebbe says, al yidei simcha, if we can keep this joy within ourselves, that powers us, that fills us with energy and vitality, we can avoid this terrible experience of misas banim, which means that we give up. And we stop putting stock in the importance and significance of our efforts, flawed as they may be. But we turn around and go home. That's called misas banim. And the Rebbe says, through simcha, through living with joy, through living with emuna, through living with neshama, ois v'chedva b'mekoymai, without the klipa of the outside, like we learned, the dust that prevents the essentially joyous neshama from expressing, hayidei simcha, nitzolim misas banim. That's interpretation number 2. Finally, misas banim could mean on a literal level, like we learned, the physical gashmias, chas v'shalom, tragic death of a child, chas v'shalom, children. But children can chas v'shalom die in another way. And that's emotional death. Children could die emotionally. They could wither up. They could lose the spark of youth that we describe as the princess, right, in the story of our lives. They can lose that. That's called misas banim. All of us want to ensure that our children are strong, that our children are healthy, that our children believe that they can make it and don't give up on their own dreams. All of us want that our children should grow up in an environment that will preserve that passionate spirit of youth and of innocence and of holiness and of goodness and of creativity and of optimism. And the Rebbe is giving us the rule here. Al yidei simcha nitzoilin mimisas banim. The primary, essential foundation in ensuring that we can experience the nachas of seeing our children thrive, says the Rebbe, al yidei simcha, is to make sure that our homes are filled with joy, that our homes are filled with emuna, that we are living in this way. And when they see that, by osmosis, this enables them to preserve what they already have, the joy that is essentially theirs, that comes along with being a neshama in a guf, which children have greater measures of than adults because they haven't yet settled fully into the experience of being a person in this world. A young soul is a bright soul, and we want to preserve that. Says the Rebbe, then you be a person of soul. Al yidei simcha, if you can find a way to fill your home with joy, if you can find a way to turn on music, if you can find a way to make sure that your Shabbos is mamish a Shabbos of simcha, dance around with your kids, make sure that your table is filled with singing, make sure that it's lighthearted, it's not too heavy, it's not too much, and you can preserve space for your kids to be kids, and so on and so forth, with not being overbearing and not. If you can make that your home should be a pleasant place, a light place, a joyous place, says the Rebbe, you can be saved from not the death, the death of children, but the child within your children. You can prevent that from dying, from withering, from closing up. So these are 3 levels of interpretation in this very short teaching, but you see how much depth there is here. And it's emes on all 3 levels. Which of them the Rebbe meant? Maybe he meant all. The simple level of actual chas v'shalom, actual death of a child, chas v'shalom. The second level is the death of our own efforts in avodas Hashem, called our banim, called our tolados, maisim tovim. And then finally, that spark of life, the spark of life, of vitality, of vibrancy, of warmth within our children, to preserve that. And all of this is done and accomplished al yidei simcha. through simcha. Okay, let's take a look at the next piece, which really feeds into this very, very nicely. Over here, you can really see why they put these two teachings together. On the surface, you might not be able to see, but Be'ezer Hashem, we're going to take a look at some teachings from Sichos HaRan, and we're going to be able to understand the connection between these two pieces. Says the Rebbe in Sichos HaRan Samach Vav, he's here ma'oyed kama pa'amim lehispalo b'koyach gadol. Rebbe Nachman warned and encouraged many times, to daven b'koyach gadol, to daven with great force, with great energy. Lahachnes kol koichai b'dibure hatfila. Put the all of you into your dibur. You ever saw a person? There are some people that they just speak with their mouth. That's it. That's the entire communication is just speaking, moving their mouth like this. I speak more with my, as you might have noticed, with my hands than I do. It's funny actually. If you take one of my shiur, I mean, you just put it on like 2 times speed, all you'll see is just like this all the time, right? Because that's that you can speak with more than just your mouth. You can speak with your eyes. You can speak with facial expressions. You can speak with your hands. You can speak with your body. You can make sure that the all of you is coming out with the words that are emerging from your mouth. Says the Rebbe, daven with all of you. Don't just daven with your mouth. Daven with all of you, like the pasuk says, Kol atzmoisai toimarna Hashem michamaycha. David says, all my whole Kol atzmoisai, all of my bones, all of them toimarna. Not just my mouth says, my whole essence, my whole being, toimarna Hashem michamaycha, Hashem who is like you. V'kamavur mizeh b'svar v'akdoshim is brought b'kama b'koimos and Rebbe Nachman's other teachings. This base is supposed to be ice base. Start from the vav. The amar kama pa'amim, and Rebbe Nachman repeated this again and again. You have to force yourself into it. Get yourself into it. And he says, not like others that say, listen, come and daven. If you're into it, great. If you're not into it, also fine. The Rebbe says, no, push yourself. If you're not into it, good. That means to say, this is an opportunity to get yourself into it. It's not just an arbitrary thing. Sometimes I'm interested in davening. Sometimes I'm not interested in davening. When I'm not interested in davening, I have the capacity to ensure that I get myself interested in davening. Very, very much to force yourself with all of our energy, the tefillah, for davening. And this can be the case with physical hand motions, like we learned before, and we've learned earlier in Sichos HaRan, maybe Gimel Dalet, right in the beginning. Rebbe Nachman says that we should daven with our hands, shekarin piechin. Remember? Yeah, that interesting Ukrainian word, piechin, like we're supplicating, like you'd speak to an individual. And the Sefer HaChinuch and the Sichos HaRan, many of the tzaddikim in different svarim are talking about a concept of chitzonius ma'oreres hapnimius, right? That the outside can awaken the inside. So sometimes, even if you're not feeling it, shakel, move, get into it, move around, walk back and forth. It's also very deep. You can walk back and forth, get yourself moving, and you can see that things start to open up, even if you're not feeling it. Physical, you can force yourself. You can start getting into it. Each of us have our own way of doing this because we're all different, unique flames on very unique wicks that are all going to flicker uniquely, right? And that's what tefillah is. So all of us are going to have our different motions and our different movements and the way that we daven. Some things that I try to do that help me a great deal, that were actually inspired by somebody. Actually, give him a shout out. There's a sweet, delicious yid called Reb Shmuel Sher, who in the beginning of my getting close to Breslov was mamish, very, very close chaver, and we were learning together, and it just goes to show, this is a good lesson. That's why I'm mentioning it also. It just goes to show you never really know who's watching, and you never know what an impact you can make on someone. Mimela. I remember there was one day, when I was in a yeshiva called Shari Tvuna. I was 18 years old, and he came to daven mincha. And I remember watching the way he davened, changed my davening forever. One tefillah. And the thing that I noticed was the way that for a large part of davening, his eyes were closed, but his face was up, which made it very clear that he was consciously communicating with something higher instead of just reading a few words of a few pages. His whole body was oriented klape mala, like he was focusing all of his energy, all of his effort toward the being with whom he was communicating. And I've taken that on. And so a lot of times in tefillah, you have to be careful, this also doesn't become rote, right? It has to be for a reason. I try to stand on my tippy toes. I try to like breathe deep and feel and move my hands and position my body in such a way that I free my neshama. I free my neshama from its enclosure within the guf that seeks to convince my consciousness that I don't really want to daven. The neshama wants to daven. Ner Elokim nishmas adam, like the Baal Tanya says. We're called a flame. Why? Because we're constantly wanting to jump off the wick. So show that in your body. Get your body involved. And your body will become a vessel that's neshama shaped, right? So to speak. And then the neshama has a kli to express itself. This is a very, very important klal. You can do this. I can do this. We can do it. We can do external things that force ourselves, so to speak, into passion for tefillah. External motions affect the emotions. Easy to remember. Motions affect emotions. Shuv Amar, Rebbe Nachman continued, when a person davens with great intention, which is the halachic definition of what kavana means. To listen with your ear to the words that are coming out of your mouth. Be conscious of the words that you're saying, so that your ears aren't hearing everything happening around you while your mouth is just a word machine just pumping out words, but the two are completely disconnected. That's called kavana. That will help to make sure that we're really listening, that we're really intent on the words that we're saying. So Rebbe Nachman says, when a person davens in this way, all of the energy in the body will naturally be drawn into the tefillah. Naturally. If we can daven with real kavana, the whole body will contribute. Because all of the forces in the body are constantly mitzapim, they're yearning. They want to be involved. The guf wants to be involved. Our physical bodies want to be a part of our holy words, which is the essence of what it is to be a person. Adam is mispalel. Adam lenefesh chaya, says the Targum, leruach memalel. A man came to life, a speaking spirit. This is what differentiates us from a behemoth. And the body wants to be an Adam. It wants to be an Adam. It's created b'tselem Elokim. So it yearns for this. Al came, therefore, kishmispal b'kavana, when we daven properly, and when we allow the words to reverberate on every level of our being, not simply to have this rote, mindless experience of this thing called a mouth, just murmuring some words that we're not listening to, that we're not focused on. When we're mamish able to daven b'kavana and imshachim and echanasim kol ha'koycha shalai, memela l'seicha tefillah. All of a sudden, you clear the blockages, the pipes are free. All of you is there in that tefillah. And there's nothing else in the world but you, the words you're saying, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who you're communicating with. And imagine how powerful your tefillah becomes. Tremendously powerful. And this is without even trying. Naturally, the body will get involved, will participate. Because these energies will naturally join your tefillah. When we daven with kavana. So it's like one thing feeds into the next. You first have to get yourself into kavana by pushing, and then once you're there, memela, the forces of the body and the forces of every level of our being contribute to this experience. Like we've already said, all the koichas in the body, all the different energies, mitzapin, they yearn, mistaklin, tamid, and they're constantly looking al zeh for this. When will come the day when they too can have the experience of being a part of this experience of tefillah. Therefore, when we daven in this way with kavanah, all the energy of the body comes into the diburim, and we can daven with tremendous energy, even without forcing ourselves, because this is a way to allow the body naturally to contribute all of its different energies to our tefillah when we daven. So now, what's the kesher? What's the bond between everything we're learning about chas v'shalom misas banim and the klipa of Lilith, which is Yilala, vis-a-vis simcha, which is the opposite of that? What's the connection between that and tefillah? So for this, we take a look at Likutei Moharan Torah Hey, the very beginning of a long and amazingly glorious lesson. It's a Pesach lesson. It talks about chametz and matzah. Amazing teaching. One day, Be'ezras Hashem, we'll learn it together. So Rebbe Nachman over here says, Ve'ikra simcha hu balev. Rebbe Nachman says, the primary joy is in your heart. And all of us have a heart. And Rebbe Nachman in Sipur Maisiya says, everything in the world has a heart. What's the heart? The heart is simcha. The heart is pumping life. The heart pumps blood that spreads throughout the entirety of the body, bringing life not just to itself, but to everything around it. Like we said, La Yehudim Haisa Ayra V'Simcha. Joy is like light. Light. You light a candle, boom, illuminates everything around it. Simcha is outward facing. It encourages us to produce, to create, to connect with friends, right? To be social. This is all simcha. And we have this belief. This is what we have essentially inside of ourselves. As the pasuk in Tehillim says, Nasata simcha belibi. David HaMelech says, you have implanted joy within my heart. That's our natural state. Our natural state is joy. Our natural state is health. It's when we start to tamper with our natural state that things go wrong. However, the only way that we can experience the innate, essential joy that we carry within is there's only one way. We need to remove the locks, not like locks, like bagel and locks, like L-O-C-K-S, right? We need to remove the na'alim. We need to remove the locks from upon our hearts. Because if a person's heart is covered over in the thick layers of everything that's the opposite of spirituality, everything that's the opposite of emunah, everything that's the opposite of bittul, and everything that's connected to ego and to control and to lack of Hashem consciousness and to physical gratification and machalas bas yishmal, like we learned, which is the opposite of kedusha. So it's going to be impossible to feel our natural joy, which is the joy of just being, which is the joy of understanding that we are flames of Hashem. Ner Hashem nishmas Adam. So the first thing we need to do, it's like I said, we don't need to acquire simcha. We have simcha. What we do need to do, however, is to get rid of all of the layers of filth that conceal and that snuff out that spark. Sheyeh lo yashras leiv. A person needs to try to acquire yashras leiv, straighten out the heart. Va'az yizka l'simcha, and then he'll merit to feel this joy. Because of uli yishrei leiv, to those that have a leiv that's yashar simcha, without aknimius, which means all kinds of convoluted ideas and convoluted emotions that aren't aligned with the essence of who we are. But how do we do this? Says the Rebbe, we know the Gemara tells us, the Gemara in Brachos and Tesam and Aleph says, why was thunder brought to the world? It was to cause us to become free from the akminius, from all of those layers of physical bonds that prevent us from experiencing our leiv. That's why Hashem created thunder. It shakes us up a little bit. It brings us back to what's important. Hashem created thunder for this reason. Says the Rebbe, thunder, not everybody always is around when it's thundering outside, and not all the time is a person in the right frame of mind for the thunder to actually do this. How could it be that this is the only way out? There's got to be something that we're in control of, that we can choose to opt in on. Says the Rebbe, there is. Ra'amim, thunder, is an aspect of a great sound, of a tremendous noise. And this thunder is accomplished when we daven with loud noises, crying out, davening out loud. Says the Rebbe, if you daven like this itself becomes thunder that clears your heart out. And what happens when you clear your heart out? You can reveal what's inside. And what's inside is simcha, is joy. And now we can see the connection between Sichos HaRan Samach Hey and Sichos HaRan Samach Vav. Because Sichos HaRan Samach Hey is the problem, right? Like, okay, we know joy is an important thing, but how do you get to joy? How do you get to joy is Samach Vav. Is tefillah b'koyach, which is a bechina of ra'amim, which is mafshit, which gets rid of all the akademia shebalev, and when that happens, nasata simcha b'libi, the natural joy that we feel is able to bubble forth to the surface. Says the Rebbe similarly in the curtailing Tarataski, ikar achiyas mekablim tefillah. Our primary vitality, our primary energy, we get from davening. Kamashikasa, the pasuk in Tehillim says, tefillah lekel chayoy, which on a literal level means David offers up a tefillah to the living God. But Rebbe Nachman interprets it allegorically on a deeper level. Tefillah, that when a person davens, lekel chayah. This enables him to come into contact with the God of his life force, with the ultimate storage house of our vibrancy. Therefore, the Rebbe says here too, a person needs to daven with all of your energy, When you daven in such a way that you invest all of yourself into davening, you get a renewed sense of life, a renewed sense of energy. But Bechinas, the pasuk says in Eicha, also in Eicha, Chadashim labekarim Rabba emunasecha. Chadashim labekarim, renewed in the mornings. We are renewed in the mornings because Rabba emunasecha, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu's faith and faithfulness and faith in us is so great. Says the Rebbe, Emuna is tefillah. Ki emuna hu tefillah. Emuna is called tefillah. Kamashikasav vayiyadav emuna. That Moshe Rabbeinu's hands were outstretched in faith, says the Targum Pearson B'tzilai. They were spread in prayer. The pasuk says Emuna, Targum Unkala says Emuna is tefillah. Chadashim labekarim. How do we get new energy in the morning? Where does that come from? Person says, I'm too tired to daven. You're too tired to daven. If you're too tired, then you mamish need to daven. Because tefillah lekel chayai, that's where we get life from. That's where we get life from davening. From davening with energy, with vitality. You don't walk out of tefillah exhausted. You walk out of tefillah ready to spend the day serving Hashem with tremendous energy. You've reconnected to the source. It's like plugging a plug into an outlet. You've charged your batteries. Chadashim labekarim Rabba emunasecha. When your emuna, which we learned as tefillah, is Rabba, is with tremendous koyach. Rabba emunasecha. When your davening is great, is Rabbah is strong, then Chadashim labekarim. Then we're able to get a sense of renewal and renewed energy from our davening. Let's finish up with the last piece over here from Likutei Moharan Sadi Aleph, where the Rebbe says, Ki yesh kama minei emuna. There are many different kinds of emuna. Yesh emuna shu rak balev. There's one kind of emuna, which again you can substitute for the word emuna, substitute tefillah. There's one kind of tefillah, one kind of faith that's just in the heart. Person believes. Theoretically, a person knows there's a God. He has faith. Yehudi balev, right? Or this terminology is a Jew. He believes in his heart. But the Rebbe says that's not really the ultimate goal. That's okay, that's good. But the main thing is that a person has so much emunah, that a person davens in such a way that a person's simcha that's in the heart is allowed to manifest where it's not just that my heart believes, but my pinky believes. There's emunah in my hands, there's emunah in my feet, there's emunah in my head. My whole body is saturated with faith. Arizal gives an example. He says, "This is brought in the Kitzvei Arish. When a person does netilas yadayim, we're supposed to lift up our hands to the head, as the pasuk says, you lift your hands to holiness, to receive that energy. given shiur on this in the past from Likutei Halachas. Nimsa, says the Rebbe, what is that when you move your hands up to your head? You can't prove that anything's happening. It looks ridiculous. Nobody's going to be convinced that this is in some way beneficial. You can't back it up, but it means that your emunah has reached your hands. You're ready to do something practical, physical, because of the emunah in your heart. You've allowed it to spread throughout your being. Shetzarech lazeh emunah biyadayim. That means that your hands are hands of faith. And every morning after you wash the Netilas Yadayim and you lift your hands up to your head, it means that your hands are filled with emunah. Amazing thing. You don't just have some belief in your heart. You're filled with emunah. Lahamin, to believe, that something happens. Yes, something happens. To believe that when you lift your hands to your head, something's taking place. The Rebbe says, if without this aspect of emunah, you could be doing all the mitzvahs in the world. He says, "Ein klum," meaning, of course, it matters, and of course, like the Nefesh Chaim says, it's changing the world. But the truth is that vis-a-vis what Yiddishkeit is supposed to be, that it's not where it's at. As the pasuk in Tehillim says, "Kol mitzvaysecha emunah." What's the essence of all the mitzvahs? What's the purpose of all the things that we do? Is emunah, to allow the emunah that we have in our heart to be mispashe, to let the neshama manifest through all the different areas of the human experience, through all the different modes of behaving. In ben adam lamakom, ben adam la'atzma, ben adam lechaveroi. We're trying to reveal the neshama. We're trying to reveal the joy that we already have inside. We're trying to reveal faith. Then he comes to a very high level of understanding. The more that he encourages himself with faith, it comes to a higher level of seichel. And this correlates or corresponds to what we've learned over here in Samach Vav, to bring all the kochos of the body into the tefillah. The body, Rebbe Nachman said, all the energy in your whole body yearns to be a part of emunah. The body wants that you should fill it, saturate it with faith. So bring your whole self to davening. And even if you're not feeling it inside, let it start on the outside. Position yourself in such a way. Physically, start to move your hands. Get into it. Start to work yourself up into a passion, like the Rebbe says in a different place, like a temper tantrum. Work yourself into a fit of holiness. And in that way, through loud davening, we get rid of the locks. We get rid of all of the external klipa of lilis, of yulala, of despair, of misas banim. We get rid of that. We leave it to the side, and we're able to reveal the essential simcha that we have that encourages the chayim of our dreams, the life of our avoda, the life of our children, both begashmiya certainly, and on an emotional level as well, to give them the feeling that they can do it, to give them an environment where they can ensure that they are keeping and maintaining that spark of joy that they have naturally within, that will enable them to march out into the world and to do great things amidst great joy, and to create and to produce and to try as best as they can to fill the world with light and to help people progress and to help the world move closer and closer into the time of Mashiach b'siyata d'shmaya. So I just want to end with a bracha. B'ezras Hashem, we should chas v'shalom never ever hear of any person losing a child. We should just never hear about it. B'ezras Hashem, ubila amavas lanetzach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should remove this thing called death, chas v'shalom, that no parent should have to suffer that unfathomable, excruciating pain. And that B'ezras Hashem, all of our children who we already have, and the children that we will have at the right time, B'ezras Hashem, they should be healthy. They should be healthy b'guf, and they should be healthy with benefesh, and they should be healthy b'neshama, and that we should help them to get in touch with the innate health that they have in their heart, with the innate joy that they already contain, and to create an environment where they can feel comfortable revealing it, filling our houses with the sounds of tefillah, with the ra'amim, with the thunder of avodas Hashem, to enable them, along with us, to bring the world to a state of ta'ir eretz michledecha, that the whole earth and all of physicality should be illuminated with Hashem's glory, where Lilis and Machalas, Bas Yishmal, all of these different kinds of klipas will go away and will kill themselves out in a battle on Some Yom Kippur, on the great Shabbos to come, B'ezras Hashem. We should be zeicha to share good news with each other and to continue in good health to explore the teachings of the Tzaddikim Amitim, B'siyata d'Shmaya. So thank you so much for joining. I'm so happy that we're continuing. We're not giving up. With no Misas Banim here, Baruch Hashem. We had a 3-week break, but we're back and better than ever. So Baruch Hashem, thank you so much for joining. I'm wishing everybody the most amazing week up ahead. L'siyata d'shmaya. Thank you so much for joining. Kol tov, everybody. Have an amazing week. All the best. Thank you very much. Thank you.